Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm so pleased that you're joining us this afternoon. And I know that everybody has such busy schedules, so I really appreciate that you've taken the time today to engage in this conversation with us. I'm Christine Thorstensen. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Development at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and we are very proud to be one of the partners and sponsors in the conversations that we're kicking off today. And our other partners, you know from joining up, we are really pleased to be working with the Early Childhood Institute at the San Jose State University, as well as First Five Santa Clara County. So we are just thrilled that these three groups could come together and engage in this conversation. And, you know, we know this is a moment of really tremendous opportunity for our early care and learning system. It's a moment of real opportunity for our babies, for our toddlers and children, for our families, and for the incredible professionals that care for them. And in this moment of opportunity, we really have the chance to be transformational and to be aspirational in our vision of what this can mean for our communities. And our hope in bringing these conversations to you was that we could sort of open a door, plant a seed, make some opportunity and space to have these conversations that think about where can this tremendous opportunity that we are in the middle of take us. And so that's what today's kicking off with a focus on equity, and we have two more planned, and at the end, Maria will share out more information about those. So thank you again for joining. I'm going to start with just a brief thank you to the team that put it together. It's been my pleasure to work with these folks for the last few months, thinking this through. So from the Early Childhood Institute, Andy Gallagher, Maria Fusaro, and Emily Slusser, who've just been fabulous. And with First Five Santa Clara, many of you know Heidi Emberling and her incredible wisdom in helping us think through all of these things. We are just a bit of housekeeping for us. Please, this is a meeting format, so please keep your microphones on mute so that we can hear the presenters. We will be recording the session today, which you're all aware of, so just so you know. And we love to have your questions. We really welcome engagement from the audience, but please put them into chat, and we will do our best to get through as many of the questions as we can today. And maybe if we can't answer some of them, we can refer them to folks later and we can get back to you. So again, thank you for joining us. Welcome to everyone who's here. We have a great lineup of speakers. And to kick us off is a welcome message from our own Senator Cortese. And so we'll just jump right in. Thank you.
I'm California State Senator Dave Cortese. Thank you to San Jose State University's Early Childhood Institute, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and First Five Santa Clara County for your work to ensure equity, inclusion, and high program quality as our community and the entire state works to implement universal pre-K. We know that 90% of brain growth occurs before a child reaches kindergarten, and that early learning is key to their successful learning outcomes and lifelong development. Yet our state has trailed behind others when it comes to providing access to early education. That's why, for the past decade, the County of Santa Clara Board of Supervisors, the Strong Start Coalition, and those of you on this call have fought hard to make universal pre-K a reality in our county and across California. As a member of the Senate Budget Committee and the Senate Education Committee, I was proud to support state investments in the planned expansion of universal pre-K by the 2025-26 school year to serve every 4-year-old in California, as well as other transformative improvements and investments in the state's early childhood education system guided by the governor's master plan on early learning and care. This early learning will provide a leg up to all of our young learners, with numerous studies demonstrating how pre-K benefits their literacy, language, math, and problem-solving skills, while also improving their social emotional development. A study by the American Institute of Research found that pre-K significantly improves kindergarten readiness, putting children ahead of their non-pre-K peers by up to 6 months in some academic skills. The benefits of pre-K are most significant for disadvantaged students, low-income children, and English learners show the greatest learning improvements. I've seen that myself. Early learning is key to closing our achievement gap. But implementation and staffing capacity is so important to ensure a sustainable strategy. That's why I continue to advocate that adequate funding be provided to support universal pre-K in all of our school districts so that we can safeguard high quality and prevent the redirection of funds from other programs. We must invest in early learning to improve our children's social emotional development and academic development as well. As your partner in the state legislature, I look forward to continuing to work with you to make a better future for our children. Thank you so much.
And we'd like to thank the Senator for sharing those remarks and kicking off this session and our series. As a reminder, we will have 2 additional sessions on this topic and the importance of transformative vision for early childhood education in our state. And now we'll introduce Dean Heather Latimer. There she is, with a welcome to San Jose State.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Andy, and thank you to all of you who've worked to put this together and for being here today for all of our participants. I know that it has been a busy day, a busy week, a busy couple of years, and the work is really critically important. But for many of you, you've been laboring in this work without a lot of support for years and years, pre-pandemic as well as during the pandemic. And, having heard from many of you over the years, it has often sounded as though you are yelling into the wind about the importance, the critical role of early childhood education, but not getting the traction that is needed. And so as Christine points out, we are at a moment where all of a sudden there is traction. There is a lot of enthusiasm, there's recognition, there are resources that are in this moment. And so how do we make the most of it? How do we make sure that the work that is being done with equity at the heart of the implementation plans, the funding plans that are being put into place? How do we make sure that we're doing work that will have the impact that we all want it to have in terms of transforming the lives of children, families, and communities? And at the College of Education here at San Jose State, we are grateful to be a part of that work. The leadership that we have in our Early Childhood Institute with Andy and Emily and Maria is really critical to ensuring the success of our future educators, as well as to our current educators and the professional development and professional learning that they have. So we're really proud to be a part of this work. We're grateful to the partnership with First 5 Santa Clara, as well as with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, to be able to put on this series and to engage with all of you in this larger conversation, and look forward not only to the conversations that will happen today and in the next couple of events, but also to the ongoing work and community that we'll build together. So with that, I will turn it back to you to do the important work and have those conversations.
Thank you, Heather, and also Senator Cortese and Christine for the warm welcome to today's session. As Dean Latimer just mentioned, we have been advocating for the expansion of access to high quality early childhood care and education programs for a long time, since the seminal work that started in the 60s and 70s, demonstrating the importance and value of early childhood education long term, not just entering kindergarten, but exiting high school. However, now that we have established in our state, and we're very excited that the state has moved forward to establish access for all 4-year-olds, the real work is going to begin, because we know it's not just access, but the quality of the programs that the kids are going to be in that really matters. And in a very timely reminder, the research out of Tennessee suggesting that it is possible that we don't just have a neutral effect from early childhood care and education, but there could potentially be a detrimental effect if we do not plan for developmentally appropriate and recommended practices to be implemented in early childhood. And so this is a good time, a good reminder for us all as everyone here is establishing their plans for UPK, that we can't just treat this as another grade. We need to have a transformative vision for our early learning systems across the state. And so we are therefore very excited to welcome Keisha Nzewe, the Public Policy Director of the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network, and trustee for the Mount Diablo Unified School District, to share with you her knowledge and expertise about the importance of centering equity as part of a transformative vision for early childhood. In her roles, Keisha has developed a deep understanding of the needs of young children, the adults that work with them, and the communities in which they live. Keisha will share her passion for and experience in ensuring equitable access to meaningful early childhood care and education experiences for all children. And we really hope that her presentation inspires you to think creatively about how to address issues of equity, both for children and for the adults who serve them. So without further ado, welcome Keisha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keisha. I'm going to give, okay, so one, I'm extremely transparent person. So you should know I straddle the world of early care and education. That's the role that pays my bills. And I'm on the school board. So in straddling this, I bring both sides. So before I get started, you should know I am on your side. We are in this together. And two, this is going to be a train wreck of universal pre-K, universal TK. So that's the framework from which I come. And I hope that though that we get to work together to, to just ignore the people above us at the state and do things right in your own communities. So I apologize for nothing I'm about to say. I hope that if anything is, makes you feel icky or anything, a lesson that I learned in November and I've been trying to put into practice is when I feel something is to interrogate my resistance. And it really works. Like I sit and I think, and I'll get one slide. Now I'm thinking about one slide, you'll see an example of that, which is how I got here today. So I'm going to share my and then I'm gonna see if I do this right. So I have up my, can you see the slides correctly? So you don't see my thingies? Okay. So let's go on this journey. I've got the clock, I've got my timing. So I'm Keisha, that's me, okay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Hanford, California, which is in the Central Valley between nowhere and nowhere, somewhere near Fresno and Visalia. A little more than 47 years ago. My mom was 19 and in college at Cal State Northridge when I was born. She continued in college away from home for as long as she could with the support of my grandparents. So in my first few months, I spent time in my mom's arms in college classes, and I spent time in my grandparents' arms at home in Hanford. That didn't last long, as my mom, like any, couldn't handle being away from me for days at a time when I wasn't in Northridge with her. So she came home, left college, and began working. And a side note, she had the goal of finishing college before I did. And my whole memory of my childhood, she was always taking college classes. But she ramped up when I was in high school because now like the rubber needed to hit the road. And she did finish college when I was a freshman in college, I believe, is when she graduated. So my grandmother had her own home-based business. So that's obviously my mom and I on the left, and in the center are my grandparents. My grandmother had her own home-based business, childcare business, before I was born, and then for a short while after. She was my caregiver while my mom worked. And when she retired, she continued to care for my oldest friend, who is in that picture on the right, who had been there since she was an infant. So I was 11 months and she was 5 months, I believe, when her name is Katie, started going there. So we've been friends. We've known each other since we were like this. So my Nana was the picture of the legacy of Black women taking care of the children in their families that aren't their own, and taking care of white women's children so they could also be part of the workforce, white women. When I was 4, I went to Rice's preschool, which was like the place to go in Hanford, which is it's where everyone went. When people in my high school graduating class talk about who remembers Rice's, I don't remember any of them, but apparently we were all there in 1978. But it was just a few hours a day. So my grandmother took me there and picked me up each day. When I became school-aged, my grandmother took care of me before and after school and during every school break, including the summers when for a few years we lived away from Hanford, and I would spend the day after, usually the day after school let out until the day before school went back in at home or in Hanford with my grandmother. This was a blessing for my mom and then my stepdad when she married, to have a loving, dependable, safe care for me at no cost. It was a blessing for me because until she died when I was 14, my grandmother, Nana, was my greatest cheerleader, besides my mom, of course. I love the stories of her childhood. I love that she took me everywhere she went, so much that in our small town, folks noticed if I wasn't by her side at the grocery store or at the pharmacy. I went to the same elementary school, middle school, and high school as my mom. I had my mom's kindergarten teacher and the same band teacher in high school. In high school, I took all honors classes. I was in band. I was in every play, even winning individual awards at theater festivals. I was a Girl Scout. And though I think the vote was rigged, I was voted most likely to succeed. Then I went to Cal, where I was in the Cal band and majored in social welfare. As a freshman, I found myself walking behind the naked guy one day and sitting next to Jason Kidd during a final on another day. After graduation, I was a VISTA member, completing my year of service in Sacramento, which launched my career as a community organizer and policy advocate. I've worked on issues like alcohol and tobacco policy, nutrition labeling on menus, the Affordable Care Act, public access to automatic external defibrillators, WIC, SNAP, child nutrition, including school meals and free summer lunch program, and for the past 6 years, childcare policy. I give you that very truncated version of my life just to share that all of these experiences helped shape who you're meeting today. I'm an extremely fierce advocate for our youngest children and the adults who love and care for them. And I'm a fierce advocate, especially for Black children and families. So how did I get to be your speaker today? So this is an example of interrogating one's resistance. Just a few weeks ago, the Early Childhood Institute reached out to invite me to speak on equity, quality, and inclusion in UPK. My immediate reaction was to give an eye roll that rivals what my 13-year-old does, what she knows to do behind my back, not in front of me, and text my colleagues and say, "Can you believe this mess?" I didn't use the word mess. But then after a few moments of reflection and interrogating my own resistance, I sent this email that you see. I share this so that if it's not clear to you, my belief is that the way our governor and members of the legislature have committed California to universal TK, it's clear they are committed to what research shows is failure. But in the few minutes it took me to send this email, I realized that this is an opportunity to do what I can to make sure as many districts as possible don't limit themselves to state direction, and hopefully locally do everything possible, even though it's not being supported that way from the state, to instead replicate models that work best for children, their families, and all the adults who care and educate them. So thank you for having me today, and thank you for all who have chosen to hear my words today. So to start, I feel like you need to get a little bit of history of childcare in America. Our childcare journey in America begins with chattel slavery, the beginning, of the yet to be United States, tearing children away from their mother's arms, tearing families apart. Black women were forced to, and dare I say, trusted to care for the white children of enslavers. Their own children were forced to labor alongside of them. And then, as I mentioned, often they were torn from their mother's arms. For hundreds of years, Black women were the primary childcare providers of white children. In an episode of Golden Girls, and I'm a huge Golden Girl fan, I can quote any episode. And so this came out of my head. We learned that Blanche had a nanny growing up, and her name was Mammy, played by Ruby Dee, who I was just such a beautiful and wonderful actress. Blanche loved her, in fact, more than her mother. This fictional relationship is an example of the legacy of Black women caring for white children. We never know if Mammy had children of her own in this storytelling on Golden Girls, but in this reality of the Black woman as commodity, it really doesn't matter. So back to history though, in the North, beginning in the 1800s, two types of infant schools began to materialize. One for affluent white families embraced the infant education movement, which emphasized early enrichment, while other infant schools for poor families, which was usually Black, were open to, quote, greatly relieve the parents from the waste of time and anxiety attendant on the care of their children. It will thus increase their capacity to earn subsistence. One of the main hopes of the Infant School Society was that the moral lessons children learned while in care would permeate into the home and eventually eradicate poverty. So you see, it had nothing to do, though, with the enrichment of young children. I'm just sharing these next couple of slides. I love finding photos of Black women caring for white children. The one in the center on the bottom is a photograph by Gordon Parks, and it's the Atlanta Air Terminal in 1958. And it's amazing to me that here's, I presume the white woman is the mother, and that the Black woman is holding that mother's child, and that we're in an airport, and it's the Black woman providing the care and love and comfort for this infant child. So why is this history important? Black women were our nation's primary early care and education providers for hundreds of years, hundreds. Today, they are joined by women of color, immigrant women, women who speak a language other than English, and multilingual English speakers. They've been doing this work of caring and educating 4-year-olds, including 4-year-olds, forever. That's going to be a theme throughout this, is my overemphasis of forever. Yet with California's approach, their expertise is being pushed to the side. So the next few slides, my friends at the California, oh, see, I can't see my slide. The Center for the Study of Childcare. Oh my gosh, you guys, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm certain you do, and it probably says it on the slide, but I can't see it, or it will in a second. But my folks at UC Berkeley, in the Center for the Study of the Child Care, it's the workforce, you can see here, 76% of children birth to age 4, and so that's the cohort that includes our TKers, are children of color. And 70% of center-based teachers identified as people of color, which closely reflects our population. And it's almost all early educators are women. And I always refer to childcare workers as women because it is like 99%. So sorry, men on the call, but we know you are there. I know some of them, but you're very few. And 39% of the current TK to 12 workforce are teachers of color. So in fact, that the TK through 12 workforce, the workforce that will be teaching TK to 4-year-olds, does not reflect the diversity of our state's children. I didn't write this down, but I want to say that my daughter, who's in the 8th grade now, has never had a Black teacher. So in 9 years of public education, she's never had a Black teacher. But preceding that, she only had a Black child care provider. And I'll speak further later in our discussion about why that was important. You'll see that this is a very educated workforce. I'm only comparing, I'm using their snapshot comparing to center-based teachers and not devaluing in any way family child care providers, because, and in fact, they are my wheelhouse and my love and joy. But it's an easier comparison between center-based because of the type of setting compared to a TK setting in a TK in a public school. So at least 37% of center-based teachers meet or exceed the requirement for TK teachers to complete 24 college units in early childhood education. So you can see between this and no, not my next slide, that we have a very well-educated early care and education workforce in California. Then as you read these statistics, you can see that from this survey that CSCCE does, it suggests that many TK teachers enter their jobs with less early childhood education experience than the current ECE workforce. So among those who responded to the survey, and this is from their workforce study, 90% have previous teaching experience in grades K through 12, but far fewer have experience with younger children. Now, we all know that teachers, no matter who you're educating, because this is so-called women's work, based in not only gender bias or sexism, but also in racism, every person who works with children is underpaid, no matter what you do. But you can see a disparity, but this really stark disparity driven by a combination of public policy, funding, and systemic racism. And so the result is a system in which Black educators and those who work with the youngest children are systematically paid the least. And so while a kindergarten teacher makes $41, a preschool teacher makes, now I can't remember, but I know the bottom one says $13. Black women on average make 78 cents less than their white and Asian counterparts. And many of those preschool teachers and many of those, well, the childcare is that bottom is the assistant in a center-based classroom. They are most likely to work with the youngest children. They're most likely to be the least paid. And as you saw previously, though, they may have the same education or greater. They just don't have a California teaching credential. And so they earn $30. I exaggerate my math, but they earn a lot of money less than a K through 12, than a kindergarten teacher. So, like I've said earlier, we've been doing this forever. You can see how long folks who work in childcare, their longevity is actually really amazing. In fact, in my own work, actually it was the February before quarantine, I had the privilege of bringing a lot of childcare providers up to Sacramento to do some advocacy. And in our morning preparation, I had folks stand up by like, how long have you been doing this? And all of these were actually family childcare providers. And I think I started, like, had everybody stand up, and then I started, who's done it for, you know, the drill, 5 years, 10 years, blah, blah, blah. But the amount of people who were standing when I said 30 years, I'm like, that is commitment. And you know, they don't get paid, they don't get retirement, they don't get all the benefits that most of us are so used to and take for granted. And that is how much their love for educating and caring for our youngest children is. So you can see that a supermajority of California's EC workforce has more than 10 years of experience. And yet, while universal TK is an amazing, wonderful step towards recognizing early care and education as a public good, like we do kindergarten through 12th, but in California, we've decided to move on a path that erects barriers for diverse, experienced, and prepared early educators to access these jobs. And then they also prevent established ECE programs from delivering public transitional kindergarten. The architects of universal TK may not intend for this policy to be racist, but ultimately the outcomes of the policies are what matter. So here we are. We're going to ignore the next slide because I had technical difficulties as coming on. So I'm just going to put it, I'm going to put the question, read the next slide, and you can just put it in the chat. We were going to build a word cloud, but my Slido won't connect. So the question is, because I'm going to move on to talking about families, what are reasons families will choose TK at a public school setting? And you can just put it in the chat. If I put the chat, did I put a box? Sibling, Cost savings for sure. The free 99. I mean, how can you turn that down? Siblings, I think being at the same school is a really good motivator. Longer hours of care is interesting because I would think that TK is shorter hours. Located at elementary school. Yes. Yes. You guys are good. You know your business. So if you're not following along, ones that pointed out to me, I really like the perception that teachers are more qualified. Absolutely. The fact that it's free for everybody, it's truly universal. It's not even targeted universalism. It's completely universal. Oh yeah, for the getting into the K-5 side that they probably, I'm guessing like if it's a school, we started in Oakland where there's school choice. If that's the school you want to get into and you can get into it by getting into TK before kindergarten, yes. These are all really excellent reasons to that I do believe families will choose to go to TK. Which families do you think, or in your experience now, which families choose TK? And I say that because in my own school district, when parents were excited about the prospect of this, it's really middle-class parents who have the means and ability to get that free and freedom from the cost of private preschool, and also who have the ability to get a child to and from school and the ability to find care before or after school that's appropriate and out of school time, and whether it's during the school year or summer and winter breaks. Okay, the next question is, what are reasons families may not choose TK? Where did my, oh, there it is. I'm like, where did the chat go? Sorry. Class size, not full day. This is going fast. I saw transportation up there. Let me scroll. That's a good one. I hadn't even thought of that. Bigger classes, even though we did get them to make the ratios, but it's not, I'll address that a little later. Need care during non-traditional hours, definitely. Age appropriateness, too academic. That has come up. So I got a letter as in my school board role, someone being upset that TK wasn't going to be at her school next year. But you can't really have TK. There's only 2 TKers. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but these are, I'm so glad. These are really good. Quality, how will 5-subject credential help care for 4-year-old without it if you don't have an ECE background? Develop me appropriate practices. Parents not able to pick up half day. Yeah. And I think about it, if I would have absolutely jumped on this chance if this existed in 2000, that would have been 2011. And I wouldn't today. I absolutely wouldn't, knowing what I know. But as a mother, Black mother of a Black child, I would not. And I would have jumped on it because it would have saved me at that time at preschool $1,000 a month. I would have figured out the rest of the day because I worked close enough that she could then go to her her family childcare provider before. So yeah, it would have been something. It would have been life-changing. Okay. So what about the babies? This is mine. She'll be mad that I put this picture here, but she won't know. Don't tell her. I couldn't find a 4-year-old picture. So this is actually her 5th birthday. So she was exactly 5 years old in this picture, but let's pretend she's 4. So in this road to universal TK, it also feels like the least thing that's been talked about to get here was the actual babies. We want 48-month-old children. I want us to all realize we're talking about kids that we can still name their age in the number of months they are. We want 40-month-old children to go to school. I know it's not, they'll be a little older than 48 months next year, but by the time this is all said and done, 48-month-old to go to school at a public school campus. And in our current trajectory, we only want free TK to happen on a public campus. That's the only place where our state will agree to fund it. But the fact is, it was stated in multiple budget hearings last year by Mr. McCarty himself, when it was a bill before it was driven by the governor's budget, that the driving motivation for doing this right now, this fast, this way, is to address declining enrollment in our state's public schools. And I think that's the absolutely wrong reason to be doing this. There's so many good reasons to provide universal, I'd just say universal preschool for all 4-year-olds. So many good ones, but this was the driving factor. And that, I believe, is what's driving how it's being rolled out. Childcare advocates have fought, again, forever to be well funded, because a child's life doesn't begin at 5 years old when kindergarten used to start, but that's how we always funded it. And so now when we put little ones on a school campus, if we put them there instead of the care that has always been provided, the care and education that's always been provided, now we can fund them. But if they're in a community-based setting, an existing ECE provider that's been here for 30 years, 40 years, those folks still have to work with next to nothing. So what about the babies? So on this next slide, I'm going to read this quote by my favorite assembly member, Mr. McCarty. That's said with great sarcasm. So he said, this was in on Capitol Radio, an article. He said, McCarty said Newsom's proposal was 99% aligned with his bill. I couldn't be more pleased that we're finally doing this, he said. It's a no-brainer that education matters. But if you look at the top issues of the day, we've been trying to tackle things like the stubborn educational achievement gap, the school to prison pipeline, intergenerational poverty, and the remedy that all experts and economists point to is early education. So in how he described what this will do, or why this is a no-brainer that education matters, can you put into the chat who are the children he's talking about? Who popped into your head? Thank you. Oh, Andrea, thank you. Absolutely. Yes. But this is supposed to be universal, you all. And the thing that has gotten me in even before the governor ran for, well, during his campaigning, he had this whole Choose Children campaign. And I pushed back on this. I didn't win, but I told them that this is wrong. That one of their main talking points was that high quality childcare will prevent children later in life from committing crimes. And I'm like, so you're just basically saying we need to save Black and brown children, mostly Black boys, so that we're safer as a community when they grow up. And that's what Mr. McCarty is saying here too. These are the tropes that we all get stuck, that we've all gotten stuck into, and that we repeat, and we think we're doing good. And I should have said at the top of this, I have done an amazing amount of unlearning of white supremacist values over the last, I'd say, decade, and it's a continuing process. And so when I say, if you didn't see that right then, that's nothing on you. We are all steeped in these values and steeped in these dog whistles of how we talk about Black children, brown children, immigrant children, anyone who is not white. And so I just want to acknowledge and recognize that, and hope that, if anything, if you haven't started that journey, that this, as I continue, helps spark it and continue it. Okay, so that annoyed the heck out of me. Then here's an article. You'll see the same thing happen. So school readiness, I know, is a really big deal. It's a big deal for many on how they measure, I guess, how good an early education a child receives. So I've seen, kindergarten teachers and or that K through 3 teacher say often how they can tell who had a really good early childhood, a really good preschool, whatever. But you see in this headline, kindergarten readiness gaps narrow between affluent and poor students. And then you look in the paragraph that describes, so what does affluent equate to? You can put it in the chat. And what does poor equate to? Yeah, exactly. Both. It is race. And we had an example of this. I think Mitch McConnell said something earlier this year, and now I can't remember the quote, but he said something about parents, and then, but it was white parents need this, and poor. It was, I think, the same white or affluent and poor dichotomy. And then he referred to white or Black parents for one or the other. But yes, so this article says, it claims it's between affluence and poor, but in our society, poor means Black. Black means poor, which is amazing. My daughter is extremely lucky to not be growing up anywhere near poor. And I grew up somewhere near poor, but not even that close, but close, poor adjacent, I would say. So the reality is school readiness is really about how well a child can fit into the white proximity of lived experience and ways of thinking, knowing, and behaving. So when we think of school readiness, as which TK is all about, getting little ones ready for kindergarten, we've approached it as how can we make them fit into this box that is known as public education in the United States, which is known as a white proximity, the white proximity of lived experience. Okay, we mentioned at the top that frickin' Tennessee study. The QR code, and that is the tiny URL that I made. No one had claimed Tennessee study, so I was able to make it easy if you want to type it in. But so this goes not to the study because you still have to pay for it. It's in a journal. It's not free yet. You won't get it for free till next year. But this is the NPR article, which really gives all the details. So I encourage you to read or listen to this NPR article. And there's actually lots of articles out there because this made all the headlines. I'm going to tell you, the week this came out, I avoided it. And for like 4 days until I'm like, oh, geez, I need to read it. And I read it. And I can't even tell you how livid. I am telling you, I was livid. I felt it physically in my body. I felt it so much that I text my friends at Child Care Law Center, can we sue the state of California? Because they're about to do this to children. They are about to do this to children. So what happened in the Tennessee study? So believe it or not, so the author, the researcher was able to follow. Tennessee has free universal TK. It is income based, though, and there's not enough room for everybody. But it's lottery. So some kids get in and some kids don't. So it was easy to set up. There was the study group, the kids who got in, and there was the control group, the kids who didn't. So she was able to follow these children over the course from TK through the 6th grade. So here's what happened. And I'm just quoting from the article. Whereas in 3rd grade, we saw negative effects on one of the 3 state achievement tests. In 6th grade, we saw it on all 3, math, science, and reading. In 3rd grade, where we had seen effects on one type of suspension, which is minor violations, by 6th grade, we're seeing it on both types of suspensions, both major and minor. And the other thing she found, or how especially the behavioral stuff happens, is that it's so simple. Buildings are not built for 48-month-olds. Therefore, you have to take, for most schools, most of our aged infrastructure, your TK classrooms aren't going to have, once you become universal, unless the state comes up with more money, you're not going to have bathrooms in the classroom. So everyone's going to have to line up and go to the potty together. And these kids were likely getting in trouble because they touched each other because they're 4, because they were talking and yapping and laughing and making noise and being disruptive to the other classrooms because they're 4. They had they don't get to, they have to go someplace to eat, another opportunity to get in trouble because of the way we structure a school day, which is absolutely not meant for the mind of a 48-month-old child. And additionally, this is concerning because we know in California, nationwide, but in California, although we have stopped the suspension of preschoolers, at least in our state preschool program, Black boys and Black girls are overwhelmingly suspended compared to all the other children for doing things that are completely developmentally appropriate for their age and that other children do without getting reprimanded, because we accept what they do as normal and what a child who is Black, especially a Black boy, does as disruptive and just, yeah, not good. So those are reasons that made me just, I felt like, oh my gosh, I couldn't breathe. I was so mad. I was so mad and hurt. So I think you will feel the same when you read it, and it will help you be even more committed to not repeating the mistakes of the Tennessee study, the mistakes of Tennessee. Okay, so what can we do with what we've got? So I pose these questions. How does your school setting differ? These are questions I think you should ponder. How does your school setting differ from the setting that 4-year-olds are coming from? So up until, if you get more, you're gonna have more 4-year-olds next year and then the subsequent years. But up until now, 4-year-olds have been where? And how is that setting different? And in what ways is that difference good? And in what ways is that difference make it more challenging to serve these 4-year-olds? How are you gathering data from parents on their needs? So we're all like, yay, parents want TK. I have to be honest, I've never heard a parent say they want TK. They want, affordable quality. If you know me, I hate the word quality, but they want affordable quality childcare. That no one has said they wanted TK. So given that, how are we engaging as school districts? How are we engaging parents to understand what their needs are? And you, in the chat earlier, you actually expressed a lot of them, from transportation to the hours of TK versus working hours versus non-traditional hours, blah, blah, blah. So I would ask you to consider that. And how are you working with and compensating partners in your community who, as I've laid out, are experts and already in providing early care and education? So how can you leverage and respect their expertise, their already existing expertise? So some things, I made a list of the things, which some of them we've touched on, but I'm just gonna read them, or I've said some of them. Rigid meal time. So I think about, I've done a paper that I'm gonna let you all read later this month on how do parents and child care providers define quality. And it's really love. But what surprised me so much is how much food was mentioned as part of really good care. And because it's love, because it's everything. But in school, there's rigid meal times, whereas in a child care setting, an ECE setting, not on a school campus, you could feed the kid anytime. Oh, you're cranky. Maybe you just need an apple. I don't know. This was mentioned in the chat. There's at school, you're going to have, it's going to be 1 to 12, if I remember the ratio. So you'll have 2 adults, let's say, assuming you have to have 24 in a classroom. And that those 2 adults have to teach all of those children, hopefully play with all of those children. But at school, it's a much more homogenous way of teaching. It's impossible to teach each child based on their individual needs, which is something that the smaller settings and ECE settings are able to do. And I think I saw something to that effect in the chat as well earlier. At school, unless you're in a dual language program, it's English only. And many families choose the settings that they're in for their young children to affirm their home language, to help them learn a new language, So language is such an important part. And then at school, it's almost always never culturally affirming. And that's so back to why it was very important for me to have a Black child care provider. And for my daughter, for me, it was like I was leaving her with my mom. It was the same foods, the same, like, just things culturally that were the same at my house, that was the same at Nini's house. That was her name, Denise, but to the kids, she's Nini. And at school, we don't have that cultural affirmation. And if you go back to the demographics of the TK work, the TK through 12 workforce, it doesn't reflect the diversity of our students. And like I said, my daughter is in the 8th grade and has never had a Black teacher. And you figure in middle school, she's had way more chances, and it still hasn't happened. And it's very unlikely to happen in high school, where she'll be going as well. So at the beginning, it was like, she's going to talk about all this. I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing all that. That was a big lift on, giving you clues on what to do. But I really hope that you'll support culturally affirming teaching. These are our very youngest children who are learning at home, learning from their families, friends, everything. And now they have the chance to come and learn at an elementary school. They are more likely to have had that cultural affirmation in whatever setting they're leaving, whether they were home with their family friend or neighbor care, their own parents, whether they were in a family childcare home, whether they were in no one should leave Head Start to come to TK, because there's just too much that you get with Head Start. But whether they were in a state preschool, they might stay in state preschool, they might choose TK. Those settings were more likely, that were not a state preschool that wasn't on LEA, more likely to be culturally affirming. So everything you can do to start that practice in TK and then help spread it out through the rest of all of the public education years would be amazing for our state's children. And then interrogate the ways in which white supremacy is upheld through our mindsets, our practices, our policies, and engagement with children, families, and educators. So how do we, when we say, oh, I'm such a great TK teacher, these kids need me, otherwise they wouldn't know anything. I've heard things like that, and where I know they're talking about their poor children, their Black children, their Latino children, their children who don't speak English yet, who are English learners, whatever. It's like we have this this mindset that all things public school is superior, when it's not necessarily. We tend to not necessarily, and once we get to public school, not respect the expertise and knowledge of parents and families. And honestly, sometimes we don't even respect, in public school, we don't respect the expertise of the existing teachers. And so, yeah, we've got to not do that and figure out what are those ways that white supremacy plays a role in that. And how can we dismantle it and unlearn it in our own minds? It has to be very intentional, I can tell you. I've had things come out of my mouth or think in my head and then go, wait, oh no, that's wrong. Okay, I hadn't, so this is one last chat opportunity because my Slido didn't work. If this was gonna be a cool slide. What are other things you are doing or plan to do or hope to do to make TK a warm, loving experience free of anti-Black racism that is culturally affirming for all students, families, and educators? I don't know that you have the answer now, but if you do, and my hope is that you take away this question. Yeah. Oh, somebody sent me, oh wait, oh yeah, I know what time it is. Thank you. I'm like, somebody sent me a message, I can't see who. I've been watching it and I'm like, oh, I really did make 42 minutes. Okay, my chat is not going off like it did before, but I do just leave you with that, with this question. Is just what parents want. And I bet you all, so many of you have been parents and have been or are parents of young children. And when you've had to, if you think about it, when we go around and find childcare, you're like, you get to investigate, you get to do all the things. But when we bring them to school, we just have to trust. There is no licensing that we can look at the background. There is no interviewing of the teacher. There is none of that. We just have to trust. So what can we do as educators in the K through 12 system, TK through 12 system, do when parents up until this point, their priority is usually kind of looking for a place where they know their child is safe, is going to blossom, is going to be loved. And yeah, how do we make that a school? So that's what I leave you with. And I want to just acknowledge that it doesn't come from my brain. I have some co-conspirators, Dr. LaWanda Wesley and Dr. Ashley Williams. They're amazing Black women, both ECE professionals, and we are thought partners in this type of work. And so I cannot like pass all of these thoughts off as my own. And then that's my email right there. Or if you Google me, I'm sure you can find me, good and bad. And I have time for questions or if missed anything.
Thank you, Keisha. That was just an amazingly thoughtful, compelling presentation. And I know we touched base earlier on the ability to use the Slido and present those slides. And I'm so glad you were able to do that because I felt like the pictures you curated at the beginning were incredibly powerful in representing the work that these women have been doing, as you say, forever. And how are we going to continue to support that workforce moving forward? So I will invite our audience to put any questions that you might have in the chat box. If there's anything that we can't get to, we'll circle back. It's also a landing spot or a parking spot for any specific comments or insights that you might have developed over the course of the presentation. So unfortunately, I can't solicit a round of applause, but I'll know that we're cheering for you on our muted side.
I love you all. There, wait.
There you go.
I'm really appreciative. I'm really glad you all asked me. I'm really glad I didn't like go with my gut reaction. Because I'm really hopeful because I see it in my own like my own talks with my superintendent. Like I know that this is put on you without like anything, all the things to make it as great as possible. And we have to do this by August. It's so ridiculous if I like, and so however I can be helpful in helping it be less ridiculous or knowing that we hit the ground with a clear intent to do no harm and to do nothing but uplift little kids. Our littlest, how old will they be? They had to turn 4 by February next year, right? So they'll be 30 some odd months or 40 some odd months when they start school. They're really little. And I know that everyone here loves really little kids. So we just have to don't, that's the other thing. Don't squash their love of learning at that age. And I think that's also a danger that we have when they go to a school site so soon. Thank you for the kudos. I don't see any questions. Did I miss anything? Are you feeling the LEAs and principals you're speaking with are understanding and open to addressing these issues? If that's to me, you're the first ones I've ever spoken with. I like talk a lot of crap, but I really only talk it to the legislature. So I do have a bill. We're co-sponsoring a bill, SB 976. I've been off for 2 weeks, so I forgot. I'm pretty sure that's the number. It is to make a have California have universal preschool mixed delivery system, as you'll read, if you read that NPR article, is referenced is how New York offers universal, so that parents have a choice between TK at a school site or whatever family childcare center, whatever setting works best for them to address all of those needs: transportation, non-traditional hours, language, culture, whatever. Or like you said, someone said having siblings at the school. And what also is frustrating is that they may not have siblings at the school. So now they may have younger siblings. So now you've got to split kids up. So if you want a free option for your 4-year-old. So we have that bill. And I hope, we have a very strong champion because she is not running for re-election in Senator Leyva. And I hope that all of us, that is one ask. I really think LEAs can be a strong partner in ensuring a mixed delivery system, because then that makes TK a true part. Then we really see it as part of the ECE system, when the way we're doing it, we're kind of pushed it into the K through 12 system, when TK is still early care and education. And so,
yeah, thank you. And I want to say, when we received that email from Keisha after our invitation to present, we laughed, because that wasn't the first time we've heard that or even felt that ourselves. Of, okay, like, I think we've gotten so used to hearing that maybe there's going to be something for universal, and then nothing ever came of it. So we were almost just not even expecting everything to come down, and then it came down, and like, okay, this is how it's going to be. How can we respond to this? So I really appreciate, and for those of you who have asked about what to do in terms of advocacy, it sounds like we have a bill to read and to comment on and to talk to our representatives about. So thank you for your,
I was going to say, the other thing you should do is talk to your legislators about the challenges of this really aggressive timeline, and without adequate funding, especially for facilities. I think it's unfair and doesn't do young children a great service. So, yeah.
So definitely, these are important things to continue to advocate on. It's not just a done deal because it's been passed in this way. But now we want to turn to welcome our community voices, Juan Cruz and Sean Girth. And they're going to describe for you how they have centered equity as part of their learning program. So their learning programs, early learning programs. So Juan Cruz is the superintendent of Franklin McKinley School District, which has a long history of innovation in early learning. And as a side note, UCI is excited to be partnering with them as part of the Eastside District's Teacher Residency Consortium, which is being led by Mount Pleasant School District. But it is specifically to prepare teachers to provide that culturally responsive, and I know quality is a terrible word, developmentally appropriate instruction in transitional kindergarten programs. And we hope to be able to continue to innovate through the residency program. Franklin McKinley School District has also established a really unique relationship with EduCare, which is a community-based early childhood care and education provider committed to establishing a model of programming that is culturally responsive and not just culturally responsive, but responsive to the needs of the community and family that they serve. And EduCare Silicon Valley serves children from the Santee community in East San Jose. And so Sean Girth is the executive director at EduCare California, Silicon Valley. And so we're going to open up their time for questions and answers from the community, or from our audience, regarding how to center equity. But before we do that, I was wondering if you guys could take a moment to introduce yourselves and then to tell us a little bit more about your early learning programs.
All right, well,
Sean, can you get us started?
I'll get us started. Juan and I checked in beforehand, so though I have train wreck written down here, and I'm feeling really compelled to try to talk about how we're going to try to stop that train wreck from happening. But before we jump into that, I want to, in thinking about talking today, everything that was said resonated so much. I think one of our common principles when we think about centering equity, and it was laid out so well in the presentation, is that there's really two key components. One is like the unlearning of white supremacy culture we all have to do, the understanding of American history, and equity being like an action step we are taking to actively dismantle and transform those systems, combined with the work that we need to do on ourselves, relationship, bias, and that deep relationship has to be there if we're going to do this work together. Educare is unique in that our founders, one of which is Franklin McKinley School District, the Santa Clara County Office of Education, First Five Santa Clara County, at the time Eastside Union High School District, Catholic Charities of Santa Clara County. When all of these organizations came together to generate the idea that became Educare, it was because I think these partners understood that children don't exist in a bubble, and no matter what wonderful things we do in the classroom, if we can be play-based, we can have center-based learning, we can have a culturally responsive staff, which we absolutely should. We also have to consider that children live in families, in a community. They could be experiencing discrimination from policing. They could be experiencing homelessness. They could be experiencing food insecurity. And the notion of creating a center like Educare was that partners with these different kinds of expertise could come together so that we could hear from families, learn from families, and get them the services that they are asking for in one location. And Juan and Franklin McKinley have also been instrumental in opening a TK classroom at Educare, so that we could begin to think through what does a TK program look like that is building on what the children have been getting in the infant and toddler rooms that Franklin McKinley can then use as a model for TK in the rest of their district. And Juan, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll just start off with thanking Keisha for pushing us to think differently, and I certainly are taking away some very important aspects of, as a TK8 school system, how are we going to make sure that we don't add to the train wreck that you're describing? And certainly the work that we're doing is a lot in our district is a push from the organizations that Sean just described in terms of how are we listening to our community, how are we working side by side with our community and our families, and not this sort of we're here to rescue you as a community kind of standpoint. And so I really do think that that's part of just our district and how we approach the work, and certainly the work around early education. We've been fortunate to have funders and partners like Packer that have sort of given us the opportunity to think about early childhood education differently in a district that started TK, and really I think it was just an extension of our kinder program. And so we've been really intentional about our FMNs and really understanding, that they are also an important part of just the realities of our community that, don't qualify for Head Start and state preschool. And our TK has been shortened, it's a shortened program. And so we, by going over to Educare and having our TK class there, we extended the day to match our kinder program. And we added additional paraeducators to reduce the ratio, because they are 4, and we need those interactions with the adults and at a lower ratio and for those purposes. And so we're learning a lot of what it is to be developmentally appropriate, culturally responsive at that age, and trying to then say, look, this is how all TK classrooms should look like and feel like and operate across the district, and not stop with TK, but kinder. They're still young children, and we have, traditionally gone to a kinder class model that is more of the, hard academic, not play-based, and we got rid of a lot of that play-based furniture and things like that that our teachers are saying, can we have back? And can you make sure that our administrators know that that's okay when they walk into our classroom and not freak out that somehow students are not sitting in rows and learning their ABCs. So it's a lot of that work that we're doing. And again, it's not only, is not possible just within the district. It is really the partnership that we have with Educare and our other partners that are pushing us to make this a different experience for our youngest learners.
Yeah, to build on that, and I was looking at some of the questions that Keisha left for us. I know you all and we all are engaged in a series of community focus groups this spring to really hear from teachers, families, and staff about what their aspirations are, what they want, where they think we've delivered so far, where maybe we've fallen short and where we could improve. And Juan's director of early learning came by the other week just to try to get really concrete in terms of thinking also about the school setting, and walked through the classrooms. And our classrooms are center-based, and also children don't have to participate in anything that they don't want to participate in the classroom. So if a teacher is saying, hey, do you all want to come over here? We're going to go out in the garden, or we're going to do science, and a child says no, then the answer is no. And that early childhood educator might try to encourage and say, well, how about if we think about it? But if the child really is like, I don't want to do this today, then the child isn't doing that today. And we also have things in the classroom, like every classroom has a center where if a child needs to go take a break and self-regulate, they can just opt out and go over there and hang out on the pillows or look at this or do that. And I think what we're moving into the planning phase and trying to align better is how do we expand these practices across more classrooms between Educare and Franklin McKinley, and how do we do the work of helping folks when that feels kind of threatening as a teacher, or that might be hard to imagine. And looking at some of those results from the Tennessee study, I think what we saw is that was part of the problem, is children were too much in these whole group settings. But how do we build the relationships to help people move there? And how do we also, I think, build the relationships so that staff can really talk about equity and white supremacy culture and dismantling that? We have a group of educators who, after an anti-bias training in December, have started weekly groups where they meet to continue the discussions about anti-bias and their own identity and what that means to be working in the classrooms. And so I think, like, really concretely, it's our job as leaders to protect time for that, and to provide educators with the space to both do the work on the classrooms and do the work on ourselves as we work with children and families.
And I'll just go back to a comment that was on the chat in regards to our LEAs and principals, are they buying in? And I think that that's some of the work that we really have to do with our administrators, site administrators, that a lot of them don't have the experience in the background of early childhood education. And so therefore, when they walk into a TK class, when they walk into a kinder class, that the feedback that they're providing is aligned to developmentally appropriate practices, and that they're not prone to go to that, sort of rows and compliance sort of approach that a lot of times our schools are known for. And so because the teachers want to feel that they're being supported, and they feel that that they're not, their evaluation is not going to suffer as a result of what the administrator sees when they walk into a classroom that may be a little chaotic, because they're 4 and 5 year olds. And they're playing and they're learning, right? One of the things that we know we have to combat right now with COVID has been this notion that somehow students stopped learning because they were not in our buildings and they were not in our classrooms. And that's not true. Students have been learning. And they've been, we need to honor that learning that has happened at home and within the community, but certainly we have an opportunity when we have these centers to make sure that whether it's in a classroom setting in terms of our district setting or a center like Educare, that we are aligned and we are providing that development appropriate. And I see, Kishan saying, engaging, loving, and caring and safe environment. And environment has a lot to do with it. And so we're fortunate that we have, in one way, we're fortunate that we have classrooms because we have declining enrollment. So all our TK classes are in these classrooms that have bathrooms and all these things. But now we have to sort of what is the extension of the environment and the furniture and the things that we have to provide in the training for our staff to really, make those places where it's not the traditional classroom K-12 environment.
Mhm. I see a question about coaching for the TK teachers. I don't have a great answer yet, but I can tell you what we're doing now and where I also see some equity issues that we're going to need to press on, which is at Educare, our coach coaches all of the classrooms regardless of the employer. And that is because we are wanting everyone to be consistent on the approach with children. So our coach is actually someone who has close to 20 years with Head Start, early Head Start, has been training and training staff on our kind of Reggio constructivist inspired approach and our supports for multi-language learners. So we feel really fortunate in that situation. And she has seen some of the writing on the wall, the way this is rolling out, and we've been talking. I'm very concerned that as some of this rolls out, she is someone with expertise who should be leading an incredible amount of training and training others how to coach teachers. And because of her career path and not having a credential, the path of having to go through a credential, at least right now, she's being told she would have to do student teaching again. I mean, it's just, and so I think we can get ahead of this. I think this is where this advocacy piece comes into play. But I can tell you right now, there are a ton of highly qualified early childhood educators who've been working. We saw that data about their longevity. We saw that data about that they share a racial or ethnic identity more common to our children than in the K through 12 grades. And I don't see what their path is yet, and they should be the ones doing this training as we move forward. Additionally, because we're trying to think through this as the ecosystem of early learning in the Franklin McKinley School District, we have incredibly talented staff in our Family Resource Center who are employed by Catholic Charities who are doing work to support family, friends, and neighbors, and are working with them to elevate quality, right? And let's just hashtag yes to redefining quality. Or eliminating it from our verbiage for something new, but still tons of talent, tons of expertise, totally trusted people in the community. And we need to make sure they have entry points and get their voices heard and leading the conversations.
And I see that Chris has a question there. But just this week, I met with the chancellor of the San Jose City Evergreen Community College District. And I will be inviting them, Sean, to a walkthrough of Educare because San Jose City has a child development program. And so I mentioned to him that I would be interested in partnering with them as a way to support our workforce development around these initiatives. And so he has agreed to come and actually bring some of his administrators and board members. And so we'll set that up.
Lisa, I don't have any kind of answer about your really good questions. I don't know if anybody else does.
In fact, I'll let my colleagues chime in on that. But what I wanted to thank both Juan and Sean for giving us this really comprehensive overview of what you're doing in order to support the UPK rollout in just this short amount of time. As a way of facilitating additional questions, and let me circle back to any that weren't addressed in the comments, I wonder if you can continue to elaborate on these community partnerships and how you're drawing on the expertise existing in the field and communicating with those multiple stakeholder groups. The reason being, I really kind of heard as you were talking about ensuring consistent expectations and language keeps coming up in this conversation, which I think is really important, pointing to terminology like quality in various contexts, and then also developmentally appropriate practice and play-based learning. So how are you bringing these different groups together in these conversations, and what recommendations might you have for other LEAs trying to do the same thing?
So I think it starts with, for me, in our district, it starts with our partnership with the Educare. I mean, you heard the number of different partners that Sean spoke about that are part of our Educare initiative, and so therefore that's where we're drawing from, because we are not by any means the experts on early childhood education. We're trying to do our best to learn from those that have been doing this for a long time. And so, one of those partners is First Five in Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County Office of Education, and then with our partners of Catholic Charity, with our family resource centers. And so I think it's really leveraging those partners that have been at this work a long time, and being open to those partnerships and those opportunities, like having a TK class at Educare, gave us an opportunity. It just so happens that Educare is right next to an elementary school where I can do that. And so, but we also have Head Start and state preschools in a lot of different campuses, K-12 settings and stuff like that. So I think it opens up the door for us to think about things outside the box that maybe normally we wouldn't have thought about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we'll have hopefully opportunities to push deeper into this as well. Now that we're beginning to start to reopen more from COVID. For example, our Catholic Charity staff who used to go to FFNs had obviously had to move everything to Zoom. And I think about, as we reopen, having them bring some of those people over to Educare and start to bring deeper relationships. We've even tossed around the idea of turning one of the classrooms into sort of a learning classroom. But I think getting back out into the community, and then also talking with, ultimately, some of our fellow organizations and partners across town and other neighborhoods like Mayfair. There are quite a few organizations who I think are really dialed into families and communities who we could extend the conversation to as well.
Great. Well, we are almost at the end of our time together, and I think from the comments I've seen in the chat box and from our amazing guests today, I think it's been a very powerful conversation. And I have to say that really was our goal. Our goal was to open up this conversation to be challenging, to be powerful, to be aspirational in our thinking. And so I really want to take a moment just to thank our amazing speakers, to thank Sean and Juan for sharing. The thing I noted from your work together, and I know you've worked together for many years, but how in sync you are, and how that partnership is so based in trust and so based in learning from each other. And you really showcase that. So thank you. Keisha gave us so much to think about and things to take with us. I know it'll be lingering in my head for many days, some of her questions, but the one that really struck me is asking ourselves, well, first of all, to interrogate my resistance. So when my first response might be a no, why is that, and what can I do about it? But the real question is, what are we doing or plan to do to make TK a warm, loving experience, free of anti-Black racism and culturally affirming for students, families, and educators? Those were her words. And I just like the fact that we could think about a warm, loving experience. Who does not want that for their babies? You know, what about our babies? So I really want to take a moment to thank everybody and to thank all of our participants and guests for giving us this time. And I'll turn it over to Maria to just close us out and let us know what comes next.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you all for participating today as we approach the end of this session. We want to thank you for joining us in this conversation and really hear from you a bit about your thoughts on the session. So I just shared in the chat a feedback link that if you could take a moment to fill out, we'd love to hear your input. And in part because this conversation will continue. This is the first of a 3-part series. Let me go ahead and share the upcoming sessions with you, details. We're going to be having 2 more sessions, one with an emphasis on quality and the third on inclusion. So we'll have Carla Bryant as our keynote for the quality session, Wendy Morosky for inclusion. And in both cases, we'll also bring in some community school district leaders to kind of provide that kind of local experience as well. So please mark your calendar for March 23rd. We are excited about these upcoming sessions. Just one logistical thing is that we'll be using the same login information. So if you've RSVP'd for today, you don't have to do it again. We'll send you the reminders so that you'll have what you need for participating. So again, thank you very much. And we look forward to continuing this discussion next time.